The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to the License to Legacy webinar that's organised by Ethical Corporation. Thanks a lot for joining. Today we're going to be focusing on the social aspects of life cycle management and working towards creating positive social impacts beyond the life of an extractive project. This webinar has been organised as part of the knowledge transfer leading up to the Responsible Extractive Summit, which is happening in June, where we will be focusing on all aspects of social performance in mining, oil and gas. I'd like to welcome our panelists today. Leading the debate, we've got Christian Spano, who is the Socio-Economic Development Manager for Anglo American, where he uses experience to design and support the implementation of socio-economic development strategies. Christian's extensive experience in the extractives industry has involved working in the Americas, Europe, Africa, and even Asia. We also have John Abraham, who is the principal of Abraham et al., an Australian consultancy that John established after completing his tenure as BG Group's local content manager on its $20 billion coal seam gas to LNG project in Queensland. Over 20 years, John has worked in a range of sectors, notably in the resources sector on the Exxon LNG project in Papua New Guinea and for Rio Tinto exploration in Laos. John is a local content specialist and provides advice to industry proponents or investors, the major contractors, governments, industry groups, community groups, and local businesses on collaborative strategies and techniques that help maximize the local content agenda to the benefit of both the hosting economy and to the investor. Now, we've organised this webinar because managing the long-term social impacts of extractive projects by providing jobs and development opportunities for impacted communities not only adheres to regulatory requirements, but can generate support for your projects from communities. We will hear from our speakers shortly, but I want to stress that we want this webinar to be as interactive as possible. Those up. We will be sending through these recordings once the webinar is finished so that you can share them with your team and recap on what's been said as well. But without further ado, I'll welcome the panelists in and we'll get started with our first poll that's going to be coming up on your screen now. Okay? So the first poll asks, what is the most demanding stage of the project life cycle when you're trying to map out a social legacy? The options that you've got are feasibility, exploration, construction, production or operation, closure, and post-closure. So if you can put in your votes now, we'll recap on the opinions, and if you can do them in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, great. So the results will be coming up on your screen now. So if we have a look at those, it looks fairly even. So the majority of challenges, the most challenging stages are feasibility, exploration, and a lot of people have voted for post-closure as well. I'll come to yourself first, Christian. What are your thoughts on those results, and why do you think those particular stages are most challenging?
Hi, Steve. Thank you for the opportunity, and good morning to everybody in the webinar. I think it's an interesting set of results. I think there is a phase that is missing that is critical, which is construction, which I would suppose would get the highest percentage of votes, and I think many would have assumed that it is included in exploration. If that's the case, I would agree with this. I mean, if you think about the level of pressure that a mining company would get in construction phase, just before production, I think that's the peak in terms of how to deal with expectations and deliver the project. And at the same time, is when you have got all your permits, is when you should have agreed all the core elements with the community, with partners. So everything should be ready to go. But at the same time, you need to make that last step, which is critical, which is actually going into construction. So I think the results show reality. If you match it with how social investments, or as we like to think in Anglo-American socio-economic development investments come on board, many times it doesn't match the expectations. So investment in socio-economic development not really come at the time that they should come, and that is a problem. So in Anglo-American, we try to build a platform early stage, so that when we get to that point just before operation, we have a strong relationship with all partners involved. We understand what the role is that Anglo-American needs to play. Most importantly, we all understand the vision of the community, and we're working together to deliver to that.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Christian. John, I'm going to come to you as well, because you've got a lot of experience in this from Australasia and sort of Asia Pacific. What are your thoughts on those results? Would you agree with them? Would you think? Would you have voted differently?
Yeah, hi, Stephen. Good evening for me, everyone. Good to be here. Yeah, look, concur with Christian. I think if a construction road had been in there, that would have got quite a few votes. But look, I thought there would be a bit of a spread, so I've made some notes on all the areas, and I'll just go through a few things. But first of all, what I would say is that all of these stages can occur over several decades, right, from initial feasibility and exploration all the way through to closure. And the ownership of the tenements, the project, or the asset can change hands multiple times, right? So first and foremost, the socio-economic legacy strategy, it needs to be like a smooth baton relay through all stages of the development and or changes in ownership. I'll give you one small example, and I've experienced this on a couple of projects where there's been ownership change during the different stages. Different owners can bring very different standards and compliance regimes in terms of their business. And when it comes to contracts and procurement, for example, an exploration company might successfully utilise a local transport company. But when the developer comes along, the same local business is deemed non-compliant and misses out on business. And that quite simply is a bad outcome, which could and should have been mitigated with some forward planning. In terms of feasibility, there's not a huge amount of in-country activity at that time. But feasibility should include a lot of research, not just into the technical aspects of a potential development, but the socio-economic baseline. It's really the first leg of the baton relay. And certainly in my particular area of expertise, which is local content, this would involve getting as good a handle as possible on workforce skills and capabilities and the capacity of goods and service providers in the country. And not just the country. If the country is surrounded by other countries, you should also take a bit of a regional look as well. Look, and there's various in-country collaboration points and other consultants can be used in that process, and done well, this should all feed into the feasibility and feed stage, front-end engineering and design, to ensure maximum local content can occur if there is a final investment decision to go ahead. Just call me up any time, mate, but I'll just keep talking until you do. Exploration, look, it's a very interesting stage, exploration, as it combines the first real intrusion into both the country and local communities, particularly if it's onshore tenements. And the locals really start to sit up and take notice of the company for the first time. Now, as we all know, exploration has got no guarantees of discovering a technically and commercially viable resource, and it also exploration comes with a relatively small budget. So, bearing both those factors in mind, the explorer needs to manage and keep local expectations in check. Yes, employment in exploration can be very beneficial locally, and it should be maximised. But I think perhaps the most important socio-economic legacy strategy at the exploration stage is one that also focuses on supporting traditional industry such as agriculture, textiles, tourism, particularly in the footprint, providing some support to programs relating to health and education, for example. And again, these can be done really well in collaboration with aid agencies, NGOs, depending on the type of country that the project's in. Construction, well, you know, there's an important milestone prior to construction, which is the final investment decision. And if you haven't got good socio-economic legacy strategies in place moving from FID to construction, it's going to be a problematic construction period, no question about it. Construction's a very hectic and intrusive time, and while numerous stakeholders will think it's great for them and their interests, there are always stakeholders that feel poorly consulted, ignored or left out. This usually is the most local communities to the construction, also local businesses watching all the foreign construction contractors move in, and job seekers basically. So the project developer needs to ensure some of its internal functions and their strategies are very well aligned leading into and all the way through construction. And in my experience, this includes policy and corporate affairs, community and government relations, human resources, and the contracts and procurement function. And it's amazing how often these functions within one resource company are not very well aligned. Important to point out too, I mean, as projects are effectively outsourced to construction contractors, it's critical that these contractors are completely lined up on the proponent's local content and socio-economic policies. And this occurs first and foremost through their head contracts, of course. A lot of monitoring and measuring and data collection should occur during the construction phase and be collected from all the contractors. So the purpose of this is to be able to ensure compliance of Tier 1 contractors and their Tier 2 subcontractors, but also to be able to demonstrate to the executive, the government and the local community the efforts undertaken and what has been achieved. From what I've experienced, nothing shuts down tire kickers better than solid evidence and a constant stream of good news stories going out into the public. But leading into construction and during it, significant programs should be constantly running that both achieve the socio-economic strategy and also prepare the country and the communities for the eventual ramp down and completion of construction. Because let's face it, only so many skilled workers and goods and service providers will be able to transition from construction to the relatively quiet world of operations. Jobs and livelihoods will be lost, and unless there is another project lining up behind the first, there will be negative views no matter what, and expectations and sentiments need to be managed proactively and reactively. Again, the program should involve collaboration with reputable domestic players in the domestic industry, education and training institutions, NGOs, the aid and development sector if they're in that country, etc. And just the last thing on construction is that you have to remember that the construction budget is something that is gradually determined and mapped out all the way through from the concept and through feed stages to the final investment decision. So it's really important that these socio-economic strategies are included in these early stages. Otherwise, there will be no budget to implement them. And again, I've seen that happen where it's the socio-economic stuff. Yes, and a social impact study is done, of course, as part of project approvals, but there's really not a lot of meat on the bone in terms of the socio-economic impact and mitigation strategies that equates to real resources being put in place, including people and finance, to run programs and to be able to collaborate with other partners. So I think it's very important that it's introduced early. Look, production and operations, for sure initially there is some challenges leading into this space as you know, there was obviously so much activity and opportunity during construction that it does take time for all sorts of stakeholders to adjust to the downturn. And that's no matter how well the downturn and the ramp down is communicated all the way through. People will get their noses out of joint. The whole business model of running an asset as compared to building a project is entirely different. Many proponent staff, contractor companies and their staff who've been on the project for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and they're well known in the community, they all just disappear literally overnight and the locals can feel quite disconnected and less stranded. But obviously once operations are happening, look, the development is now earning an income and it'll be operating for several decades, one would assume. So look, the owners of it should have the strategies, ongoing strategies supported through its revenue streams and continue the programs even if they are to a lesser degree. Closure, well, numerically that's not as big a shift as it is from construction down to operations, but it is big on many fronts as it is the end of an era. It's the end of a source of economic benefit for so many individuals, businesses and also of course the government in terms of royalties. Obviously there is local content opportunity in the decommissioning and rehab phase of closure, so that's certainly not a waste of time there. And finally, post-closure, let's go all the way back to licence negotiations many years earlier where royalties and numerous other things were negotiated. I believe the investor should have negotiated in and encouraged various legacy initiatives that the government itself should be planning to fund and run on the back of decades of royalties. Health, education, traditional industries, new industries, continued local industry development in the sector, etc. Really important. Capacity building of governments actually, depending on the country, is also very important because you know, some big projects that kick up in a new country, the government has got no experience in handling that sort of level of royalty, and corruption can be quite a significant issue. So there's an invested interest for the investor to make sure the government has actually got the capacity to manage all the royalties that do come in over the decades. And lastly, look, again, for the government, they should also, post-closure, they should be leading with local and international industry players. You know, it's a time when all of the workforce and business skills built up during one project should be securing new opportunities on new projects, whether it's in the same country or outside the country. I mean, parts of Africa, Southeast Asia and the West are all examples where this has occurred. Many countries' greatest export is in fact its people. Some people view this negatively, but it shouldn't be seen as negative as their endeavours overseas lead to earnings being returned home. So that's all I had, just to open up on that. Sorry I went on, but I thought it was really hard to try and guess which one would get the strongest score. I thought they were all very relevant.
That's fantastic, and thanks for so much depth there as well, John. That's really appreciated. And yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. Each stage is critical, and each one provides unique challenges. As you rightfully put, you know, challenges at a at an early stage, at construction stage, are going to be very different to something when you get closer to closure. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a few more polls looking at those individual stages or groups of stages. The next one's going to be coming up on your screen in a few seconds. Now, what we want to know is what are those challenges and why are they difficult? So we'll go to the next poll, which is looking at those early stages, which are construction, exploration, and feasibility. And in these phases, what are the biggest challenges? So the options you've got here are managing community expectations, assessing skills and competencies at a local level, so doing that baseline assessment, assessing the requirements for your project in the future, developing a local content plan, or procurement. Now, like I said before, we do have the chat question, the question box open. So if you think there are any other challenges on there, please list them down there as well. But if you can vote now, we'll count down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and the results will be coming up on your screen. They are quite overwhelming. The majority of people listening in today think that managing community expectations are the biggest challenge at an early stage as well. Christian, I'll come to yourself. From a socio-economic development perspective, and considering your experience with Anglo-American and in the extractives industry, would you agree with those results? What are your views on that?
Well, I think thanks again, Steve. I think it's an obvious one, and anybody that has worked or spent a week close to an operation in any of those phases, more when you're getting close to construction phase, you can feel it that people really, the expectations are incredibly high. And the first thing that I want to say is that many times it's our own fault, in the sense that we get to those stages sometimes without a clear strategy and without having engaged properly. So at Anglo American we have different tools and policies that allows us to get to that stage with an agreed vision with the community that goes beyond policy or regulation from the country. And it doesn't go into the traditional grant-giving exercise or CSR activity. I think most of the time when you get very, very high expectations is because you haven't engaged properly. It's about you telling people what you think is best for them, and also you can build a huge level of expectations if you just go out and respond by grant giving to any kind of request. So if you have been doing that for a long time, starting in exploration phase, and you continue in that way, what you're teaching people locally and even the government is that, first of all, this is not a partnership, and this is a one opportunity in the life of people in that area. So you need to grab that opportunity. So I think that is something that needs to be managed, and to do that, I just want to go to the second point. When I see the options in the poll, they reflect a very how can I say, focused approach. So you have developing a local content plan separately to procurement, separately to assessing future project requirements, separately to assessing skills and competencies. I think to be successful, you need to put all of them within a strategy, and you need to understand how they interact. So let me give you an example. We have a project in Brazil, a $15 billion project in Brazil. And what we learned in Brazil is that if you don't connect your activities within a strategy, and people don't understand that they are part of the strategy and a key part of the strategy, you're going to end up in trouble. So we put in place, in coordination with the local communities, a best-in-class local procurement program. The local procurement program was received very positively. It started to deliver jobs. It represented at 1.8% of the local economy, and it created. It helped us to build trust and to be closer to many community members. Now, because we were treating that local procurement program separately, we started to create friction with other SMEs that were not going to be suppliers because they didn't have enough maturity or they were not in the right sectors. So we put in place an enterprise development program and a workforce development program attached to the local procurement program in a way that the enterprise development program could mitigate the growth on the suppliers, on the local suppliers, so that everybody could grow together. So the local suppliers will connect with the broader set of SMEs. They will spend their money locally on a broader set of SMEs. The broader set of SMEs could find people that was trained to employ because we have put together our workforce development program together with the government. And so what that generated is that the cost to Anglo American was a fraction of what it usually is when you put programs separately. The response from the local community and the government was one of a partner. They understood that we realized the mistake of doing things in silos and the benefit of participating in an overarching strategy. And the outcome today is that these three programs work in a system that goes beyond our own supply chains, beyond the mining sector, and actually goes into the most important stakeholders that we have in the area, which are farmers, dairy farmers. So I think the first point is on the response, on that 74%, there is a way of avoiding that, and that is building trust early on and providing the right signals. It's not grant giving. It's not we tell you what you do. This is the legacy that you want. It's about setting a dialogue and a true dialogue where everybody takes responsibility, and it's not about the mine or the mining industry and the community, but a broader set of participants like other industries, other companies in other sectors, and we sit all on a table and we discuss the future of that area together because we are all the players putting effort and making that area to prosper. It's not in our case Anglo American only playing a role. Although we might be the biggest player in one area, we are never the only player. And grant giving should be taken as the last resort. You need to work with people that and organizations that do great job in other areas and might be already doing a great job. And grant giving should be allocated strategically to those that are the poorest of the poor or are in great need. And then the second point is on having strategies in place that benefit the company in terms of really building a resilient context. But obviously having lower costs and much better relationships with key stakeholders. Just to finalize this point, Stephen, it has been an interesting experience in Brazil. I mean, you can Google the names of the programs. I mean, the enterprise development program is Crecer, the local procurement program is Promova, and the partnership and the program on workforce development was done in partnership with the local government organization Senai. And if you want to know more about it, you can just Google the names of the programs and you can find out more. That's all from me for this point, Stephen.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you for doing that as well. And we have had a question as well that's come in from Alex, which asks about not just, as you say, not just thinking about the community, but looking at all stakeholders. One of the most important, well, not the most important, but the one key stakeholder is actually internal stakeholders. And a question has come in which asks, what about getting senior project management to accept that local content is key to building and maintaining a social license to operate? So John, on local content, I'll come to you. What advice would you give for anyone wanting to gain internal support from people who might be focused at the different elements, so whether that's cost, production targets, anything like that? What would your thoughts on that be?
Well, look, it's a really good question, and I remember the gas project I was last working on, Queensland, and a lot of execs in from Europe, Scotland, Texans, and all the rest of it, and they'd never worked in Australia before, but here they are, executives and managers on a $20 billion project. I think, oh, well, Australians are the same as the rest of the world, we'll speak English and let's get on with it. And the safety stats were going in the toilet really bad. The project in Queensland was significantly the worst performing HSE project of the entire global group. So everyone was scratching their heads about that, and it was interesting. The initial sort of response to it all was to kind of rattle the saber from the top, to introduce more policy and layers and levels and all this sort of stuff, and it didn't help. And they finally sort of cottoned onto it, and they did start turning it around by approaching it from a cultural point of view. Australians are people that tend to just, if you've got your own job and someone next to you who's got another job needs a hand, or they're currently in the toilet or something like that, you'll go and do it. Okay, and you'll probably go and pick up a tool or pick up something that you're not meant to do, or this type of thing. So it was actually a cultural thing. So they started turning a corner on that. But look, going back to the poll, and look, I think Christian covered that extremely well. Looking at the screen right now with those poll results, you've got five bars there. My short response is do 2, 3, 4, 5 well, and number 1 will be achieved. Similar to Christian, I sort of looked at a lot of that and thought, well, they're all parts of a framework. Without doubt, the overriding issue is around the greatest concern is around this community expectations or perceptions. But you can bring that red bar right back if you do 2, 3, 4, 5 well. So it's and a big thing that I had to push on that cultural side as well within the business was a lot of people viewed local content as just purely a social license agenda. And I had to be very clear, both to senior management and across functions, to say, guys, this is not. I'm not here, and I'm not coming to work every day thinking that I'm just pushing a social license agenda called local content. And the way I would explain it and would map it out, and it's the way you have to actually develop your local content plan and various other things around it, was to state, guys, if you do local content well, this will actually deliver value into the business in terms of real hard cash savings. I'll give you an example. We had there was an early strategy with coal seam gas involves multiple onshore wells. In the case of the ones in Queensland for a 2-train LNG, the project estimated and worked towards 2,000 initial wells. So that they're quite small wells, got a footprint about the size of a basketball court, so about 2,000 wells. Lots of civils and earthworks in preparing all of that, and the access ways for the drill rigs and etc. So the initial strategy was to bundle that up in terms of a contracting strategy and just give it to a big tier 1 national sort of company. And they got a price back, they got a price back basically. And a few people fortunately said, righto, let's have a bit of a think about this, and let's actually do some supply chain mapping. Let's actually see what local capability there is in the civils and earthwork space. Let's go into the regions and start meeting some of these businesses and checking them out, kicking the tyres. So that happened, and the result was that the contracting strategy was debundled. Yes, it meant more contracts and a few more contracts administrators and a little bit more overhead to manage multiple contractors. But the rough estimate is that about $500 million was saved over 4 years by not bundling it up to a mega tier 1 contractor. And we all know that you don't necessarily get economies of scale with tier 1 contractors. They actually get the proponent over a barrel in many ways, and you pay quite a lot for those big bundle contractors. So yeah, that's one thing that I'd stress is that local content is about selling it internally and then engaging externally. It's about pushing the value piece. It's not just a social license thing.
Fantastic. And Christian, I think you had a comment on that question as well, didn't you, about engaging internal stakeholders around local content?
Yes, very quickly. I just wanted to echo what John was saying in terms of delivering business value through socioeconomic development strategies. I mean, most of the time you will hear that the business case that social performance team will present is to executives in the company in terms of developing local suppliers or hiring locally, or even going beyond and focusing on agricultural development and so on, is because we have to do it, and that's the bottom line. We have to do it. To do it well, we need X amount of money, and that's most of the time, and that is just it's just killing our own capacity to get funding and to really articulate the value of what we do. If we really look this from a strategy, from a core strategy perspective, what you're saying is, first of all, understand the real baseline. If you don't do it, you might not have a project. So forget about the option of not doing anything. You will have to do something. Now, what that something looks like, that's the real question. But there is a feeling internally, many times because of our own fault in the social performance team, that there is an option of not doing anything, because we have been telling them that we have to do it without really articulating the consequences of not doing socioeconomic development strategies well. Now, the consequence we could be that a project with all formal licenses cannot get to construction, and we have seen that in Peru, we have seen that in Guinea, we have seen that in many places in the world recently. Very large mining projects. Now, if you do it in the wrong way, like just giving grants, just doing CSR, what you're going to be doing is increasing the expectations over time and building more expense over time. So you really need to bring the core business to this equation. You need to link suppliers in a way that delivers savings to the company. And you can do that. It's not always a cost. Now, building a local set of suppliers opens markets that previously didn't exist. And usually they are large markets if you don't do it alone. If you partner with other mining companies, with other big companies, the local suppliers that you manage to build and grow together, it's a big market. And guess what? Banks will come in. And banks will like to lend money to them. And banks will like to participate in the cost of the local procurement program. And so the same with local recruitment or local employment. If you really map your needs over the life cycle, we have saved up to 30% of the employment costs in many parts of Latin America. Now, you can even go beyond and go into the more social space. If you match the effort that you need to do in local procurement with enterprise development activity, the amount of money that you need to spend in the enterprise development activity that goes beyond your supply chains into other sectors or SMEs in other sectors is smaller, because you do it in a proper way. You engage early stage, you explain the approach. Some are going to be suppliers, or some are not going to be suppliers. So you understand it's an application process, it's not giving money away. So expectations are managed, programs need to be smaller. If they need to be big, you're not the only one making them bigger. So participants increase their participation over time because they see the programs are linked, are working and delivering. So you're not the only one funding everything all the time. You have the government, you have banks, you have other companies. And in that way is how you build a legacy. And a legacy that is more over time built and driven by local capacity and not over time increasingly driven by you only, which actually kills you when you want to leave the area in whatever the time is. It could be 7 years, 30 years, 100 years. So all of that needs to be articulated in a business strategy. Your baseline is not doing anything, first of all. You will have to do something. And you need to show options that go beyond grant giving or CSR. It needs to be linked with savings. It needs to be linked with risk management. And it needs to incorporate more and more partners over time based on successful delivery. I think that's an important point, Steve, as we cannot convince people internally just by telling them that we have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to what you said before about looking at those core business values as well. We're a little bit short on time. It's really interesting, but I think what we'll do is we'll go to the next poll, just because we've got 2 polls left to do, and this is looking more at the production phase. So as John alluded to before as well, you know, the projects can change hands a lot of times. You get expansion, you get contraction. So it's really looking at what are the challenges when you're in production phase. Now, these challenges should be coming up on your screen now. So is it actually the challenge of executing your strategy? Is it keeping stakeholder engagement going? Is it actually planning for closure whilst the mine or the oil and gas project is still running? Is it adapting to a contracting or expanding project, or is it about looking at those budgets and adapting to the external environment? So if you can all make your votes now, we'll close that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that has finished off. Majority of people say that managing budgets and adapting to the external environment. So I'm guessing at the moment it's probably front of a lot of people's minds with commodity price as it is. Secondly, very shortly behind it is adapting to a contracting or expanding project. So I'll come to you first, John. Just very briefly, what are your thoughts on that, and why do you think that those are such big challenges at the moment?
Yeah, look, definitely agree with the managing budgets and adapting to the external environment. I mean, if you think about it, all projects come into being based on some, well, obviously there's stuff in the ground, but based on calculations of commodity prices and forward offtake agreements, et cetera, and just looking at the oil and gas space in the last little while, getting down to the price it is. Again, I'll use the new Queensland gas LNG market or export producers at the moment. It's a double whammy. Because you've had the peaking of construction, ramping down, going into operations, and then on the back of that, also got the crashing oil and gas prices. So the awful lot of restructuring, budget cuts, getting the gas companies getting as lean and mean as they can possibly get. Lots of things obviously have to get prioritised and sacrificed in that process, and some of these programs that we're sort of referring to, they can be impacted upon, which is a shame because in some respects they're probably needed more than ever because again, talking about local content and local business participation. swags of local industry around Queensland and Australia, both in the gas sector and also in coal and iron ore, are just being laid off or literally sent a letter saying from the resource company saying we want a minimum 30% reduction in your costs, and we'll talk more from there. So it's tough times. Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. And Christian, I'll come to you, but just before I do that, we are running a little bit short of time, but this is going to take part in our conference that's happening in June, on the 29th and 30th of June in London. So if we don't get all of your questions now, please have a look at the brochure, and we will be addressing these in a lot more detail when we've got a good couple of days to go around that. But Christian, on those poll results, what are your thoughts on that? Would you agree with those results?
I think it's a difficult one, Stephen, in the sense that it depends on how you have presented your strategy and whether you are delivering to those business values that we were talking about before. I mean, if you have a strategy that is delivering savings and it's allowing the company to perform, and you have articulated the business case and used time to present results of that strategy and engage senior leadership on that, yes, of course, everybody's being challenged now in terms of budgets, but you're going to be a source of savings. Now, if that's not the case, if you are still articulating your business case as we have to do it, absolutely, you will be challenged. Everybody now is challenged, and it's, as John was saying, incredibly difficult times. But it's as easy as I got this challenge recently, and one of our operations in South Africa, our site in South Africa, was being challenged in terms of the budget that they were putting in local procurement and in general in socio-economic development. And we just answered, well, we can reduce the programs, but that would also reduce the savings that we deliver, and it will increase the risk for the operation. And a day of stoppage is around $6 million. And usually you don't stop for a day. You stop for a week or more. So we can do it. We can reduce with cost, budget cost or everything, but savings are going to be bigger than the savings that you do by cutting my budget. And the risk is going to be much higher. So again, going back to building a strong business case, even when somebody asks you to reduce your budget, and I think it's fair to senior leadership. I mean, they're asking you to address a situation. They're telling you basically reduce 20, 30%. Fine, these are the consequences. If you want to make a decision to keep going and reduce 30%, then go. But I'm telling you, the savings that I could be delivering are bigger than that 30%. The risks that I'm managing, it's much more important. So I think it depends. These answers are depends on how you have positioned your strategy and your business case. And I think just one final comment. I think this is a very exciting moment in the life cycle, the production phase, the expansion phase, mostly. This is when you build and make concrete the legacy. This is when every partner starts to grow, local capacity starts to improve. This is when you actually build that legacy. This is when you, as a main player, start to reduce your participation as local capacity grows, as other businesses increase their participation in this strategy. And hopefully when you get to contraction, you can actually get to contraction with no problem, because you have other mining companies participating more and willing to participate more. You have other sectors taking what you're leaving because you need to leave. And you have communities that understand that you have been talking about this for decades, and that you have put in place and brought partners that allow that transition to happen. So this is, for me, a very exciting moment in the life cycle.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you for that, Christian. And just on that point about the savings that can be made, if you haven't already, I'd advise all the listeners to have a look at the Harvard report on the cost of company-community conflict, which is really extensive and proves that business case. Now we'll go to the final poll, which is about closure. So this is looking again at what are the challenges at this stage. So the options that you've got are coming on screen now. They are establishing lessons and learning for the next project, being able to communicate your successes, the use of land post-closure, preparing employees for life after the project, or preparing local businesses for success post-closure. So this is really when the legacy actually manifests itself. So if you can make your votes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that's a little bit more evenly spread. Again, we're looking at preparing local businesses and preparing employees for life after the project as the main challenges there. So it's really looking at those people and preparing them for a change there. John, we've just got a couple of minutes, but can you share your thoughts on that, and then I'll come back to Christian again.
Yeah, sure. I focused on the bottom two when I saw that. Probably the biggest challenge, but also the best opportunity, and something that can be planned and worked towards quite early in the project. Look, and you've got to remember too, a lot of employees might be quite happy to go back to being a farmer or whatever. You know, they busted their butt working shift work on a project and being at toolbox meetings at 6 o'clock in the morning for 4 years. And they've now got a car, a house, and the kids have got funding to go through a decent high school for 5 years. So it's not always about onwards and upwards in every respect. People do go back to their traditional areas as well. Businesses, yeah, look, it depends again. The education piece during the heydays of businesses doing very well during construction and operations. Well, one would hopefully assume that the proponent would be encouraging and involved in collaborative programs that are about business development and coaching, showing them, well, you know, certainly showing them how to diversify their business. One of the challenges in a lot of countries with new projects is that it's a bit frightening. You get these great local content statistics, but when you scratch the surface and ask one simple question, how much of your turnover is with us, and how many of them say, oh, 100% of our turnover is with you. Not a good stat. So it's about preparing local businesses for success, success and post-closure. They've got to move on to other clients. They potentially should be looking at other countries, other provinces, etc. So yeah, I think that preparing the local businesses in particular is a bit of a tough one. Employees, people are relatively mobile. They'll go back to what they were doing, or they'll move around the country, or they'll move overseas. They'll follow the jobs. Local businesses, it's a bit more complicated and needs a bit more effort.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And Christian, if I can come to you on that, what are your thoughts on those results?
I think I would agree with John. I mean, there are always options in terms of the way you close a mine, and absolutely, I've seen it in many parts of the world where you assume that employees are going to be very unhappy, and some of them are very worried, but many just see this as an opportunity. And as John was saying, many have saved money, have managed to make good investments, and this is an opportunity to start a new business, and an opportunity to move somewhere else. They get a contract somewhere else. So I think we need to always keep that in mind. We need to think about what is the strategy here, where is the opportunity, how we can make the most of it. Now again, going back to the original, I mean the beginning of this conversation, if you have done things more or less well, and you have a number of players now playing their role in a cohesive strategy, building platforms, yes, you're closing one mine, but you would have the government playing a good role. If the government is not playing a good role, then you have NGOs playing a good role, then you have other companies playing a good role. So it shouldn't be that dramatic. It's always a tough moment. It's always difficult. But it goes back to, if you have built a legacy together with the local population, and you have done it for a number of years, this is actually the moment when you see that happening. You can go away and you can see how the legacy that people wanted to achieve 25, 30 years ago is there. Maybe not exactly as you envision it at the beginning, but in a good way, in a way that people still can find a job, can still work, have more capacity, and can continue without you being there. So again, this might be the most exciting moment if you have done things well.
Brilliant, that's fantastic, and thank you for those thoughts as well. We've got a few more questions, which unfortunately we haven't had time to be able to get to. But if you're interested in coming along to London, we will be really focusing on this topic over the next 2 days. We do also have a special report which is focused on this exact topic. It's over 70 pages. Receives, you've got in-depth case studies on that as well, and it really outlines the regulations, expert insights, and everything around this topic as well. So if you come to the conference, that's free with a diamond pass as well. Now, I'll thank you for joining. I'd like to thank Christian and John for their insights as well. If you've got any other questions, please do post them in the question box, or feel free to email me. I'll put our website and my contact details down once the webinar's over as well. But we feel that this is a really important topic that people need to get right, because so much influence is put on the environmental aspects, and often, particularly in guidance, the social aspects are looked out. So thank you all for joining. Thanks, John and Christian, for your time. I hope that you found this useful, and we will be posting around the recordings. A few people have asked for the names of the projects that Christian mentioned, so we'll post those through with those recordings and some answers to your questions there as well. But thank you very much for taking part, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.